Good evening everyone, and thank you for joining us here tonight. My name is Joanna Braniff and I am the Rivers Trust All-Ireland Communications and Advocacy Manager. I also chair the Northern Ireland Freshwater Task Force. This evening I want to talk to you about a freshwater issue that's been generating a lot of alarming headlines in recent years, and that's the dreaded blue-green algae. However, it's important to note that I'm not here to delve into the science of blue-green algae, but if that is something that you're interested in, Dr. Neil Reid from Queen's University Belfast gave an excellent presentation on the topic to this group in January, which you can view on YouTube, and we'll post the link in the chat to take you through to that. So blue-green algae, as we all know, is merely the latest visible symptom of a much broader environmental crisis. That's one that's deeply rooted in decades of unsustainable land and water management. And while I'll use the example this evening of blue-green algae in Lough Neagh to explain the Rivers Trust response, everything that we're going to discuss this evening also applies to any freshwater issue that sparks community concern, whether it's sewage discharge, flooding, drought, pollution, habitat destruction, housing development, industrial expansion, or even significant fish kills. And the reason that it applies across all of these topics is because when threatened, people quickly realise that fresh, clean water is a vital resource, and the stakes rise dramatically when there is a risk of it being reduced or contaminated. Unfortunately, truth and reason are often the first casualties of a freshwater crisis. And tonight I want us to explore how can we respond effectively to crisis within our community, how we can empower people through knowledge and help develop long-term solutions. And I want to use the example of Lough Neagh, which I'm sure many people in the meeting tonight will be aware of, but I just wanted to show you and give you some figures, facts and figures about Lough Neagh. It's the largest freshwater lake in the UK and Ireland, and it's also the cornerstone of Northern Ireland's ecological and social landscape. It provides drinking water to over 750,000 people, and its habitat for a rich diversity of wildlife, including several endangered species. The loch is also internationally recognised wetland under the Ramsar Convention and is essential for migratory waterfowl. So when the algae blooms appear in the loch, particularly during the warmer months, local, national and even international news outlets have lit up, and no doubt will continue to light up, with headlines accompanied by a flood of social media posts showcasing the disaster of the toxic water. Journalists, editors, influencers, and even those with personal agendas often focus on the most sensational aspects of the story because that's news and that's what grabs attention. But what rarely makes the headlines are the long-term, often invisible impacts of such a crisis to local economies, public health, and communities' mental and physical well-being. Environmental crises can also fuel community and political tensions, particularly if the responses or what's perceived to be the solutions are not agreed upon across the community. These sorts of crises can reopen old arguments and amplify an us versus them narrative. In times of crisis, people seek someone to blame. There's a strong desire to point fingers, hold someone accountable, and demand immediate answers, often without really understanding or even caring about the long-standing systemic failures that have led to this particular breaking point. So let's focus on Lough Neagh as a case study. In 2023, it became a hotspot for blue-green algae, and that news dominated national and global headlines. Apparently, the blue-green algae was even visible from space, perhaps catching intergalactic attention. There could be aliens out there right now trying to come up with a solution for this. But the immediate impact was clear. A foul green mass of algae engulfed vast sections of the loch. Water-based activities such as swimming, boating, fishing were abruptly halted or curtailed, with health warnings issued by various agencies, often leading to public confusion. Distressing reports emerged, family pets dying after contact with the algae, and emergency services repeatedly called to homes where the foul stench of decaying algae was mistaken for gas leaks. But whether verified or not, these stories fueled the media coverage, Lough Neagh became a national conversation piece. Even for those who had never actually even seen Lough Neagh, they became concerned experts with strong opinions on the issue. And while the effects were undeniable, some of the impacts are harder to see and quantify. So what we did know was that the businesses reliant on the lough saw losses, families worried about the safety of their drinking water, community mental and physical health and well-being suffered, children were genuinely frightened, tourism was impacted, farmers were blamed, political divisions deepened. So as we can see, blue-green algae isn't just an environmental issue, it's a people issue. And unfortunately for many, their first meaningful encounter with a local water body occurs during a crisis. This means that moving forward, they associate that river or lake or lough with danger and trouble. It's a threat to be neutralised swiftly. What they don't see is a fragile ecosystem thrown out of balance by human activity. What they see is a threat to their life, and they want that problem solved. But as we know, large-scale environmental problems are rarely resolved quickly, if ever. And when environmental crises unfold, their impacts ripple outwards, affecting livelihoods, public health, community trust in public institutions, and even impacting long-standing community relationships. Yet the public often views an environmental crisis through the lens of a Hollywood disaster movie. The monster appears, chaos ensues, and a hero swoops in to save the day, and that's the problem solved. Of course, until the inevitable sequel. Unfortunately, real life isn't like that. And we as NGOs, we're not superheroes, and nor are we emergency responders. We don't arrive with sirens blaring, ready to vanquish the problem overnight, and we can't offer any quick fixes. Our role is different, and that's what I want to explore through our experience as the Rivers Trust through Lough Neagh. So here you can see the complexity of the real solutions that are required, in this case, to tackle blue-green algae. So I suppose the question that we want to ask here is, what is our role when these sort of disaster or crises strike? So when the Lough Neagh crisis escalated, we as the Rivers Trust, we didn't grab our hazmat suits and our nets and go out into the water. Why? Well, because that might have made a great photo opportunity, but it would have actually done nothing to solve the problem. Instead, we tried to focus on what we do best: communicating, advocating, gathering data, and helping co-design long-term solutions. And here's some examples of how we responded. With initial communication, we issued clear, science-backed press releases, no fear-mongering, just facts. We connected journalists with trusted experts, and we offered people like Mark Horton, who's our All-Ireland director, so that the media had credible sources and could trust the information that they were getting and pass that on to the public and to the legislators. We supported solutions. We evaluated and publicly endorsed the Northern Ireland Executive's Lough Neagh Action Plan, backing measures that directly address the crisis. We stuck to data and issued guidance. We created an easy to understand guide for both the public and policymakers, explaining what blue-green algae is, its impacts, and the immediate actions that were required. We made this freely available on our website and sent it to political parties to ensure informed decision making. And you can see the cover of it there on screen at the moment. It's still on our website if anyone's interested in downloading that. We went for strategic advocacy in that we engaged directly with the politicians, with the Office of Environmental Protection. We highlighted legislative gaps that were actually worsening the crisis. We met with the Environment Minister, and we proposed realistic policy changes that could lead to results. We adapted our agricultural programme, recognising agriculture's role in nutrient runoff. We expanded our sustainable catchment programme to provide farmers with tools and advice to reduce pollution at source. And we're now pushing for this approach to be rolled out across other catchments, particularly those that are feeding into Lough Neagh. We went for cross-border collaboration. We looked at how the rivers feeding into and out of Lough Neagh don't respect political boundaries, and therefore neither can we. So we strengthened our cross-border partnerships to tackle transboundary pollution. We also engaged in long-term planning, and we've become active members of multiple working groups alongside governmental bodies, politicians, communities and other NGOs focused on the long-term health of Lough Neagh. And we also have future campaigns planned, including one that will involve the public tackling the often overlooked issue of poorly maintained domestic septic tanks, which is a hidden but significant contributor to nutrient pollution. So again, we go back to asking, what is our role? And sometimes crises can actually act as a catalyst for change. Although devastating, they can actually spark positive change. What they do is they thrust urgent issues into the spotlight, they motivate communities to act, and they open doors for policy shifts that once seemed impossible. Crises can also serve as a gateway, offering moments to educate, inspire and mobilise. When communities care deeply about a local issue, politicians often follow through with funding and plans for improving the issue. But that we need to respond strategically and we need to respond quickly so that we can harness that energy, so that people don't become jaded by the problem or overwhelmed by it or think that there actually aren't any solutions. So we have a really important role to play in that. And that moves us on to, the question I want to ask you as a group or you as an individual. Do you have a crisis plan? The question I think you probably want to ask in the light of what we've been talking about tonight is, how would your team respond if your local river, lake or loch faced an environmental emergency or an emerging crisis? So do you have clear communications protocols? Who are your go-to experts and allies? Have you reflected on lessons learned from past challenges? And you know what? If your answer is, I'm not sure or no, that's okay. Because now we're looking at it and this gives us all an opportunity to see how we're going to plan to react to this. And you can see on the screen here that it's not just having one plan, because what tends to happen is these things roll out and unfold. So you need to have a plan for the aftermath, a short-term plan, a medium-term plan and a long-term plan. And each of these different stratas of your communications and your actions will fit into this, but again, worth looking at before you find yourself actually in that crisis. And here's some questions that maybe you want to ask yourself, or you want to get together with your team and have a planning session around this. So, do you have clear communication protocols? Who's supporting you? Can you collect data? There's a multitude, a whole list of things here that you can ask yourself. And if this is an exercise that you want to do, I'm happy to follow up and provide you with some of these questions and maybe some of the answers and examples of things that we have done in the Rivers Trust that might inform your own responses. So what we've seen as we've discussed this tonight is blue-green algae. Whilst we've used that as our case study, it's a symptom and not the root cause. It's part of the systemic breakdown in terms of water management. What we've also learned is tackling the real problems requires proactive planning, strong advocacy and empowered communities. What we also have to be honest about is we are not the heroes in the disaster movie, but what we are doing is providing a really important role by helping communities write a different narrative for the future, a more positive one and a more sustainable one. And I think it's important, and that's why I was keen to chat to you tonight about this, to share our knowledge and to learn from one another and build those strategies that really last. And actually on that note, in terms of knowledge sharing, and again, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk through this tonight is I wanted to flag up with you the upcoming Rivers Trust online conference, which is actually on the topic of blue-green algae. We're hoping to attract speakers from some international speakers, some people from South Africa potentially, some people from the Netherlands, and lots of contributions from right across the movement, because although we're looking at blue-green algae in the context of what's happening in Northern Ireland and in Ireland, on the island of Ireland, the blue-green algae is also causing a lot of problems in England and in Europe and in much further afield. So we're really keen to open this dialogue and open this conversation and to particularly learn from each other's experiences. So while you may have not have had direct experience of blue-green algae, you may have dealt with a community crisis, and your learning could be really valuable in terms of how we prepare ourselves for what unfortunately looks like going to be more recurring crisis and more frequent crisis. So if you do want to get involved with the conference, if you want to provide a paper, please get in touch with us. Again, we'll put the link in the chat. Please get in touch with us if you want to present a paper or maybe take part in a panel discussion. I know the deadline is tomorrow, but I could flag up with my colleague Rebecca Duncan, who's organising the conference, if you wanted maybe to submit something by the start of early next week. And also, even if you don't have something to submit for the conference, we'd really love you to attend. And again, the link that we're going to share with you, you can register free. The conference is completely online. It runs from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We will be publishing the programme and agenda over the next few weeks. So now is the time to sign up. And finally, if you have any further questions that you want to ask, I'm hoping the presentation I've given tonight will stimulate some discussion, and we can share our experiences of this. And I'm happy to take any questions regarding what we've been doing in Lough Neagh and further afield to deal with these crises. So thank you very much for your time and attention. And as I said, look forward to take any questions.